that annoying. How does it feel to be totally overgrown? Is it a challenge to you?
It works both ways, you know. There's the horizontal and the vertical.
Yes. Yes. Anyway, Rob, it's great to have you. You are a Dorset man, aren't you?
I was born in Weymouth. Went to school here in Poole Grammar School.
Right.
Don't know how far away that is from here. Was it about 5 miles away?
I don't know. I have no idea. But anyway, and did you do well at school?
Yeah, I did. The reason we were here is that my father was a Royal Marine, and he served at Hamworthy because that was his specialisation. He was an instructor.
Okay, Royal Marine, and presumably that meant that you were always moving around.
Yep. No, I went to change schools 14 times.
Were you expelled?
No,
but
I think so. No, just following the flag, you know.
Really, how was that to change schools all the time?
It was okay. What it did was to focus us inward as a family. We were very close, tightly knit sort of family.
So it's a happy family you grew up in?
Oh, yeah.
And brothers and sisters?
I have a sister who lives in California, so I didn't see very much of her.
No, okay.
But Dad's still alive. Lives up in Swindon. And
so were you brought up with stories from the Navy and seafaring stories?
All the time. You know,
right.
It was a real treat. Dad spent quite a lot of time away, for a year, a whole year. When I was 6 and 7, he was away for a year, and then when I was 10, 11, he was away for a year, which is a long time.
It is.
But a treat for us on Sunday morning would be to climb into bed with Dad and sister on one side, me on the other, and he would just tell us stories.
Really?
And Thelma, he often used to tell us about fighting in Malaya, and he was there in 1950-51 with 4-5 Commando, fighting Chin Peng and his people for 18 months. So actually, been shot at.
So does that mean as a little lad you sort of had an idealised, exciting view of life, and it was going to be natural for you to join the Navy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all you ever wanted to do?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I've always been interested in geology.
Right.
And that's
Is that because you were born on this coast?
Yeah, it was actually. I got interested in it studying the Jurassic Coast around Weymouth and stuff like that, walking and spending time with Dad, so that was good.
So were you a handful for your mum to bring up?
Probably. I remember one incident when I was being chased by her around our rockery, and she was brandishing a rolling pin and a wooden spoon. But fortunate she didn't catch me.
Didn't connect. Okay. All right. So various schools, university.
Yeah, I went.
Where did you go?
I read physics and geology at the University College Wales, Aberystwyth.
Oh, did you? All right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so really, in many ways, ordinary sort of upbringing, except that your father was often away.
Yep.
And a good home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Religious or not?
Well, the interesting thing is that when Dad was away, it was kind of religious. When he was home, it certainly wasn't.
Okay.
If you see what I mean.
And yet you imagine, anything to do with the military, they have chapel services.
Yeah, they do.
Chaplains, padres, etc.
No.
So he sort of paid, a nodding respect to these things, but didn't personalise it?
I don't think he really paid a respect to it, actually.
No, okay.
As I was just saying, he fought in the Second World War. He fought, in Aqaba and in the Red Sea and Malaya, and he was a child of the Depression, and circumstances and what he had seen turned him away, I think, sadly. But he's, I wouldn't say he's, completely committed, but he goes to church every Sunday night.
Okay.
And he hears the gospel, so that's a good thing.
He's obviously getting on in years.
Yeah,
you're
91.
not exactly a spring
No,
chicken,
quite. Well, it takes one to know one.
Okay. So, Rob, university. Mm-hmm. Now, university is an opportunity to discuss, debate, think things through.
Uh-huh.
If I'd met you, say, at 18, just about to go up to university, and said, "Are you a Christian?" what would you have said?
No.
You would have, were you an atheist, or you just were not sure, or?
Wasn't something that played a part in my life particularly.
Right, okay.
Having said that, I did meet this girl.
Right. They're always dangerous, aren't
They
they?
are very dangerous.
Yes.
Yes, it was Christmas Eve, and her father came and collected her at 11:15 to go to church.
Right.
And I thought, well, I'll tag along, see what happens, and sat a couple of rows behind, and heard the gospel again. You know, I all through, and I had people had taken me to Sunday school and religious education, and we'd done beach missions in Weymouth and stuff like that.
Good.
And all those little seeds and what have you had been planted along the way. But I remember that Christmas Eve hearing the gospel and listening to the creed and things like that in church. And do I believe that? Do I believe in God? Well, I suppose there must be one. Do I believe in Jesus? Yes. Holy Spirit? Don't really understand that. So that was a start.
Okay.
At that particular point.
So university, you know, there are active Christians in university. You always get lots of Christian students, don't you? And did you meet Christians with whom you could debate or discuss?
No, we used to take the mickey out of them, actually.
Did you?
We were really nasty.
Were you out to have a wild time at university, or did you?
No.
You went to study?
Well, I enjoyed it, actually.
Right.
You know, I mean, the reason I went to Abbott was A, because they would have me, B, because the geology around there is fascinating, especially up in North Wales.
Right.
And you could do walking in the hills and mountaineering and all that sort of stuff. And loved it. You know, played rugby. It's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
But not really taking Christian things seriously.
No.
So straight from Aberystwyth into the Navy?
No, I was what they call a university cadet. And so I was paid by the Navy while I was at university for my last 2 years. The first year, I was thinking, not quite sure, should I join the Navy? Should I become a geophysicist? And then I met this guy who gave us a lecture on being a geophysicist. And he was doing a survey of the Rub al-Khali Desert, which is, you know, Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And he'd been doing it for about 10 years, and he'd got as far as the K in the middle. And I thought, this doesn't sound like fun. So I'd obviously met Janet, and her father was a strong believing Christian. And I watched him, A, as a naval officer, and B, as a Christian, and the way he operated. And he was a very strong influence on both Janet and myself.
Okay. So was Janet a Christian at this time when you first met her?
Yeah.
And so you liked her, and she began to chat with you about things?
Yeah,
Take you to church?
Well, she was the one I met on Christmas Eve.
Oh, right, so you pursued her. So were you watching the vicar at the front, or her 2 rows in front?
I listened to the vicar, actually. Couldn't quite say. I was actually quite surprised, you know, how many of my rugby playing mates
were there?
Were in the church.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, well, it's not quite so daft after all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was it through talking to her father that you really began to take things seriously?
Yeah. And then I was at Dartmouth. We had a fantastic chaplain down there. His name was Ray Roberts. And he sort of, you know, again, you know, as you were saying just now, you do go to church. And if you're in a church, you hear the gospel, and you know, it starts to enter you in some sort of way and change you. And I was confirmed while I was at Dartmouth.
Right.
And said, I believe in Jesus. And
so at what point, Robbie, I don't know whether there may not have even been a point, but do you feel you crossed over the line from being somebody who wasn't a Christian to somebody who was a Christian?
No, because that makes it sound it was something that I had done, and I didn't really. It was something that Jesus had done. And I think that at my age now, which as you say is advancing, looking back, as it were, through the telescope backwards, I can see that Jesus was working through my entire life. And I was fighting against it at some points. I was ignoring it. So there was
a moment of submission, though.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Do you know when that was? Or?
No, I don't.
No, it's just a gradual thing.
It is very much a gradual process. I mean, we'll come on to a bit later in life, perhaps when we talk about Joanna, my daughter. But that was part of that process, and I think that was probably, if there was a moment, it was about them. But what it is, it's a difference between believing and knowing about. And what happens later in life is that you enter into a relationship with Jesus, and you realize that he loves you,
Yes.
and that it demands a response, and you actually have to turn around and love and obey and serve him.
And this was a very gradual thing for you.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I sometimes think of it, you're sort of walking along like this one, and Jesus is over here and you're here, and you sort of come together and you sort of realize, oh, hello. And you've been there all the time.
Right.
Do you see what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
Let's come back to the Navy. So, what was your first posting? It's a long way down.
It is a bit. Yes, I'll go down there, see if there's anything else I can do when I'm down there.
Yes, absolutely. So, what was your first posting in the Navy?
Well, you're in a sort of training cycle to start off with,
Right.
Which is Dartmouth. So when I was at university, good evening, Phil. Not too late.
Oh, is this the son-in-law you were telling us bad things about a
That's the
moment
one.
ago?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, right, you missed a treat. Yeah. Right. Go on. So,
Yeah. No, you go through the training thing, and you have to pass various exams before they unleash you as what we call an officer of the watch, where you drive the ship on behalf of the captain. So that process started over 2 years at university, then back to the college, Dartmouth, for a while. Then you go to sea for a ship, then you get another course, and that takes about 4, maybe 5 years.
were you seeing the world? Did you go everywhere?
Where did we go? Yeah, we did Europe, Antwerp, all around Scotland, Bermuda, New Orleans, Virgin Islands, Harstad in Norway. Yeah, so you see, you know.
And at this stage, were you married?
Yeah.
And did it worry you that, like your father had been away for such long stints of time, you were away?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, Janet's dad was a naval officer.
Yeah, so you both
And
used to it.
he was an engineer and probably didn't go to sea quite as much as a seaman officer like myself. But yes, I mean, we both knew what to expect. You know, we were sort of in the firm, as it were.
And the transition from ships that are above
Yeah.
the sea to submarines that have sunk.
Well, no, they don't.
No, they don't sink, okay.
No. There is a rule. Right. You know, the first rule of submarining?
Go on.
The number of surfaces equal the number of dives.
Right. That makes sense, yes, okay. So how did you transition from one to the other?
How? Well, do you mean why, or?
Yes, how did they...
Well, again, I was talking to Thelma earlier on, and it's quite intriguing, actually. The first beach mission that I went to, and the first submarine I went on, both happened when I was 6.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
So
it was Portland Navy Days, just down the road. My father was on a ship about to deploy, and there were 2 submarines alongside, which I've since found out were HMS Solent and HMS Sea Scout, and I went on both of those and had a look through, age 6, and looked through the periscope, thought, whoa, that's impressive. So that was, planted the seed, as it were. And then I was on Blake, which was a cruiser, and we'd been across the Atlantic in horrendous weather, Storm Force 10, with the rigging screaming, really rough, green coming over the top. And we were in company with a diesel submarine who was coming over with us, and those guys had just been tossed around all over the place.
Really?
And we anchored in Bermuda, paint ship, ready to go into New Orleans, and Narwhal came alongside, and this scruffy band of smelly, dirty submariners trudged up the brow. They had a couple of beers, had a bath, ate, had a few more beers, went to sleep, and then toddled back down to the submarine, off they went. And I thought they were one of the most tightly bound professional groups of scruffs I'd ever come across. And we had a guy down in Dartmouth who used to tell us sea stories about his time in commanding submarines, and I thought, that's what I want to do. So off we went.
I've just been in a museum where I've been in a submarine. They are very constricted places, and you're not...
Which one did you go?
Oh, I've no idea.
Was it in Chatham?
I've no idea. It was just a boat that was called a submarine.
Yeah.
And, but I just know they're not really designed for big guys, are they?
No.
How did you cope?
Well, can I show you?
Go on then, yes.
See if this works. No, that's blue. That's the sea.
That's the sea, yes.
Yeah, and that's my daughter, or one of my daughters, in fact. That's Joanna, and you can see her driving a destroyer. I can probably see it over there better without breaking your neck.
Right.
There she is.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, yes.
But the trouble with being on what we call a skimmer, which is a ship that goes on the surface, is that you've got all these windows and things hanging down, and the compass repeats up there. And if you're tall, you're always doing this. And the ship's going up and down, so you're doing this sort of...
Well, it's good exercise.
Yeah, it is. But I found this much more comfortable.
Oh, right.
And that's in the Pacific off Mexico going up to Vancouver. And you'll see that there's lots of headroom.
Yes.
And you can stand at the front there and be grumpy and not talk to anybody and just enjoy being at sea.
But when it goes down, you get wet.
No, you don't, because you shut the hatch.
Oh, all right, okay.
That's a rather strange photograph. My mate Ken, that sort of little shelf underneath,
Yes.
well, that was my bed. And just stuck on the bulkhead there, you can see a picture of Janet. And that cupboard on the right there had everything that I had on board, all my clothes. And,
amazing.
yeah, so it wouldn't...
And I don't know how much you're allowed to tell us, but when you go under, for how long are you under?
Well...
Days? Weeks?
You can. It depends, how long's a piece of string and what you're doing.
So the longest you've been under?
You can pop down for half an hour, or you can stay under for 2.5 months. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And, does it drive you mad? Do you get claustrophobic?
No.
Because you're so busy, or?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yes.
People say they get claustrophobic. I say, no, you don't have time to be claustrophobic. You are exceptionally busy.
And you were a submariner during the Cold War.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you allowed to tell us where you were working?
Yeah. Let me just see if I can... I mean, this is rather tedious because I've got to go through them too. One of the things about the submarining thing is that I served in submarines for 25 years. So when I started, they were quite rudimentary. One or two of you here might recognize the guy on the helm there as my grandson.
All right.
And that's a submarine that's in a museum. So that was sort of...
Okay.
And that's what they look like these days.
Huh.
And in that 25 years, there's an incredible transition.
So did you always have David Cameron with you?
No, he's just one of a number of really cool visitors we had. We had others.
Oh, right, okay.
And that's the Princess Royal looking through my periscope, which is probably about £750,000 worth of kit.
Really?
That she's looking through, yeah. And the Duchess of Cambridge with her submarine badge. And that's inside a modern submarine. So there's a lot of, you don't get claustrophobic in that. You could say, would you get claustrophobic in the room that we've just been praying in? Because it feels the same.
Really?
Yeah, and it's an interesting intellectual exercise because you're dealing with so many inputs that are coming from outside the submarine, and then all the sensors that you've got, which you then use that huge array of computers to analyze and decide what's happening.
Now, you were there as a Christian, because you don't really imagine naval officers to be particularly Christian.
Why not?
I don't know, but that's the impression
Well, that's strange.
I've got.
Actually, I think in terms of the general population of the United Kingdom, more of them are than the UK.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that one has to do as a CO is to have an act of worship every week.
Right.
And it is one of the regulations. Believe it or not, I forget which number it is, but it is part of the Articles of War that religious services will be held on board. So every week when we're away at sea, we have church.
It's not compulsory for...
No, but say in Osiris, which was my first command, out of a ship's company of about 75, we'd have 12, 15 people come to church every Sunday.
Really?
Yeah, and one of the things about it is you're away from home for quite a lot. Actually, what it does is to link you with your family at home. It did with me and Janet. I mean, I knew that when I was at church on board the submarine, and we'd pray about our families and many other things, of course, and we'd read a passage from the Bible and sing, not very well, it has to be said, and we would say the naval prayer and all that sort of thing, I knew that she was doing the same thing in Faslane or Plymouth or Portsmouth. And that was something that helped the separation, helped us to cope with that separation, which was,
Interesting.
a big deal.
Rob, sorry, going back to the question I asked earlier,
Yeah.
are you allowed to say where you were operating during the Cold War? Are you going to change the subject again?
No, that's cold.
No, right. Yes, okay. And,
I became, through this trip and a couple of others, an expert in submarine Arctic warfare. And so I spent quite a lot of time up there and working with the Americans in the Arctic Submarine Laboratory in California and in Northwood as well. So what the job we're doing up there is locating and tracking Russian missile-firing submarines and finding them and keeping track.
when you say keeping track, what, you're just shadowing them?
Yeah.
And does that threaten them in any way? Is that...
Well, it might do, but the job is not to let them detect you.
Okay, right.
Because throughout the Cold War, we did have an advantage.
In that?
We had better engineering and better sonars and, well,
Right.
dare I say, better crews.
Right,
you know.
okay. And you must have, thought through, Rob, that a Christian in the military could mean the possibility of killing, who knows, several people. How have you reconciled all of this?
Because the job of the military is not to kill people. The job of the military is to stop people from killing each other. And if you're on a deterrent patrol with 16 nuclear missiles on board, what your very presence and the way you operate and the fact that you do have those advantages and the fact that you can navigate to an accuracy of 100 yards and the enemy knows that if you do launch them, they will be wiped out. That stops other people doing the same. I mean, it's a crazy, crazy game. It's called MAD, it's called Mutually Assured Destruction, and it seems to have worked for the last 60 years.
Yeah.
Crazy, but true.
But you've got to be one step ahead all the time.
Yeah. And I used to think, well, obviously you do think about it a lot, but you do trust the system and the people that are in that chain of command. And I was assured, and in my own mind, I'm absolutely convinced, that if we got the order to fire our nuclear missiles, my wife would be dead. And so would you. And so by being at sea and stopping that was a good thing.
But if you did get the order, you'd be the one who, as it were, pressed the button.
I wouldn't, well, no.
As the commanding officer.
No, I wasn't the commanding officer of a missile firing. I was the navigator of a missile. So my job in that particular process was, as I say, to navigate to an accuracy of 100 yards for 60 days, which is what we did. Yeah, it was. Looking back, I think that was really quite an achievement.
It was incredible. You must have had some close shaves near, some scrapes where.
Why?
Well, because we're human. And I know you a little.
Yeah. Yes. I think arrogant as well. It's one of the failings.
Did you have some close shaves at all?
Yeah, one or two. I think that was a bit close, but it was all right.
You got away with it. Did you really love your time there?
I did. It's one of those things that as you do get older, that your spectacles do get slightly more rosy with time.
Right, okay.
And you forget, actually, it's wonderful driving through the tropics going past Mexico, but there are times when you're in the Storm Force 10 in the Atlantic and the waves are up there somewhere and they're about to land on top of you and you're going to get very, very cold and very, very wet very quickly. And the other thing that is difficult is that you are away from home. And our sort of average in those days was between 200 and 210 days away from home. Sometimes we'd be in a port somewhere where you can go and have a few beers, but you're still away from your wife and family. But the crazy thing is, you're at sea and you're busy and you're doing all the stuff and you're with your mates and it's exciting and all that sort of stuff. But you're thinking, I wonder what's happening at home. I hope they're all right. I'd like to be at home. And then you come home, and coming home is wonderful. And one of the strange things is that you just realize how wonderful creation is in many different ways, because you spend a couple of months in this enclosed space, come home, and think, God, what's that smell? And you realize that every single tree has a smell. And it's not just a sort of pine tree sort of smell. You can tell the difference between an oak tree and a beech tree. And they're beautiful, but because we're sort of used to it, you don't get that.
Yeah, I can imagine the smells underwater and not exactly. Anyway, we won't go down.
No, they're very, very
yes.
earthy.
Earthy. Tell me about your family then. So, how many children have you got?
3.
And who are they?
Who are they? Well, Tim, he's a surgeon commander, dentist in the Navy.
Really? So, is he posted all over the world?
Yeah. Well, they're preparing now to move from Portsmouth to Gibraltar. Well, they go for 2 more years. They had 3 years in Brunei 12 years ago. But yes, he's a professional dentist. Then Katie is our middle child, and her husband Phil is here.
And she lives here, comes to this church?
Yeah, it took me to bits when Nick dropped me an email saying that you'd contacted him. I said, what you don't know is that I'm Katie Jack's dad. I found it very amusing. And then Joanna, we met on that first slide. She's a naval lieutenant at the moment, isn't she? Yeah.
Right.
She's also married to a naval officer. So
amazing. It really is in the blood.
It is a bit, yeah.
Do you regret what you've done through your DNA to your children?
No, not at all. I think they're great.
Do you? Yes.
But only half of it's mine.
Now, you said there was an issue with Joanna.
Yeah, let me see what I can find up here. Oh, there's some polar bears eating a submarine. And that's a submarine on the surface. No, Joe had scoliosis. And that's a picture of an X-ray of someone who's had an operation that Joanna had when she was 18. Scoliosis is a curvature of the spine, and she had to have it straightened. Big 8-9 hour operation, very worrying, a threat of paralysis, a measurable threat of dying.
Right, okay.
And as I say, she had that when she was 18.
So now, you were a Christian then. How did that impact? Did it make you doubt? Did it make you wonder, where is God in all of this?
No, it didn't actually, because there were a number of things going on in my life at the time. Katie was up at Oxford University, and she went to a church and took us to it, where the Bible was taught beautifully. And we would go to a church, to the student service.
Okay.
And it was full. I've never been in a church with so many people. And the kids were all there. They had their Bibles open on one knee and a notebook in the other. And the rector at the front was saying, this is what the Bible says. This is what it meant when it was written. This is what it means now. This is how you apply it to your life now. And that just was wonderful. Katie also bought me a Bible that I could understand. Now, we'd lived in the States, and Janet and I had been involved in studying the Bible. Particularly, we did one course on Psalms, didn't we? From the old King James version of the Bible.
You see, they like the name King James, don't they?
Yeah. Well, not only that, but don't like to think of myself as being particularly stupid, but I find it very difficult to read that. But Katie bought me an NIV, a New International Version, and suddenly I could understand what I was reading. It was the same as was being taught in her church. And then Joe's operation came up, and I was on a course at the time, a Christian course, a little bit like Life Explored that's coming up here. And I went down, and I was really worried that she wouldn't be able to move. And I was sitting at her bedside in intensive care, and she was in pain, and she was self-administering morphine, and her sort of legs moved and moved. I thought, thank God, because there wasn't a lot of praying going on. And sat at her bedside with those other things going on, the course and the Bible and the teaching. And I said, right, I'm going to read that. So I started reading the New Testament. I started at Matthew and read Matthew and Mark and Luke and John and Acts and then Romans. And I thought, I understand. And I think the combination of those things were the point that I realized what we were talking about to start off with, that Jesus does love us, that you have to enter into this relationship with him. That relationship is one of service to him, and you have to take yourself, which is the big problem when you're talking about arrogance and all those other things, out of the equation. And that is the point that I found myself serving the Lord. And I have done ever since.
Of course, Romans especially focuses very much
absolutely.
on the fact that Jesus has died for our sin.
Yep.
Did you see yourself as a sinner?
Yes, and one of the things that I find, and this was, when was this? This was probably 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago. I think you realize just how much of a sinner you are, but more so. As time passes, you become more aware, think, oh, goodness me, did I do that? Did I say that to somebody? Did I do this? And you then regret it, because you're more aware of it. If you're not a Christian, you say, oh, it doesn't matter. You know, I'm in charge. There are no rules. There's no right, wrong. It's fine. But actually, if you are answerable to Jesus, you think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You know? But then it's okay.
Because of forgiveness.
Because of grace, because that Jesus died for our sins on the cross. And it also says, I think in Romans, that you are set free. You know, you're released from that. You know, that's what salvation is.
It is.
Yeah.
Time's more or less gone, but I'd just like to ask you, because the news tonight, I don't know whether you saw it, Marine A, in inverted commas, has had his sentence reduced from murder to manslaughter. This is a guy who killed the wounded Afghanistani soldier.
Yeah.
And
The Taliban terrorist, you mean?
Yeah, well, okay, yeah. But yes, I'm not trying to make a political point. I'm just saying, can you understand the stress that a man like that would be under in those circumstances?
We went, again, we were talking about Malaya. And my father, as I say, Royal Marine. And we went, not really a pilgrimage, but we went to the places that he fought. I thought, how on earth did you do that? And we went to a Christian cemetery where, amongst other graves, there are 9 gravestones. One of them, George Westbourne, was my dad's best friend, who was shot when he was 25, and they were great mates. And I rang up Dad and I said, look, I found this website about this thing where George is buried. And he said, who else was there? I said, well, and there was a list of names. And I read him the name, and he said, yeah, he was killed 8:30 in the morning on the 10th of February 1951.
Really?
Okay, what about so-and-so? He was killed in an ambush halfway up towards Cameron Islands, date, time. When I saw him, he had 3 bullet wounds in his chest. It was funny, he said, that when you've got 3 machine gun bullets in your chest, you don't actually bleed much, it just sort of sits there. And he, in his mind, had those images engraved. And goodness knows, what seeing that and being involved in that does in terms of PTSD. But it's one of those things that, again, Jesus says, don't judge, I'm the judge. And you don't know what we ask of our young men to do. And it's easy to sit here with our feet up and,
Oh, no, I didn't mean anything condemnatory at all. No. Just interested in your point of view. Now, looking back, you entered into a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ years ago. It became clearer 20-odd years ago. How is it impacting you now to be a Christian? You're presumably a retired gentleman. You do your gardening, you plant your lettuces and...
No, I guess we're doing people. and when we're members of a church family, which is
It's a very similar church to this, isn't it? In
It
Yeovil,
is.
yes.
I mean, it's delightful. We've got children who are under 3 months, and we've got my friend
People like yourself.
one even older, Jeffrey, my great friend, currently in hospital, nearing the end of his life, age 92. And there's this wonderful spread of ages and genders and children and jumping around and all that. And it's a good church. But no, we're quite involved in that church and church life. We I don't want to bang on about it, but we lead a fellowship group, a Bible study, and involved in the fabric and the finance. And
But
like I said,
your
doing
relationship with Jesus, has it become deeper? Has it become more intimate as the years have
Yes,
unfolded?
I really do. Yes, it has. And those that don't understand, I know I struggle with a couple of buddies who firmly don't tell me about that stuff. Believe that sort of thing. I say, yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, this is important. And that sort of worries me. Sorry, what was the question? I can't remember.
I'm just trying to understand what really, if I was putting it very bluntly, what does Jesus Christ mean to you now, is what I'm saying.
Okay, right. So those guys, in their mocking, will say, Jesus is just a crutch. Church, it's just for losers. It isn't. It isn't. Jesus died for us. And I often used to wonder years ago, so what? Lots of people have been killed. But then you kind of realize what it meant to actually, in his death, bear my sin. And yours, and everybody else's. And to be abandoned by all his friends, and to be beaten, and then to also, at the moment of his death, to be abandoned by God himself. He bore that, and you kind of realize what that means. And some people say, it's a crutch. Well, damn right it's a crutch, because I need it. Because, as we said, we are all sinners. There was a lovely, in fact, there was a horrible television program on recently, where there's a policeman and a nasty guy who's a drunk and a murderer, sexual predator, and they're in a car together, and the policeman says to somebody afterwards that he said the worst thing that you could ever say to me. I said, what's that? He said that we were like each other. And the guy who was, the murderer, the drunk, the sexual predator, was saying to the guy who thought he was all right, that you're a sinner too. And I thought it was an interesting interplay.
Very interesting.
In judging and
come on
judging
to
other people.
that in the roundup. Rob, it's great to have you. Stay here a moment. I'm just going to say a hearty thanks, and I'm sure in a moment we'll express that to you. Thanks. But you will stay. You'll mingle, won't you?
For sure,
and chat and stay. Don't dash off too quickly.
No.
Sure, we'd love to chat, and you'll sign a few books, perhaps. But Rob, thanks ever so much. Really appreciate that. We're going to have some nibbles and drinks brought round now. They are free, and so feel free to indulge as much as you wish, and then we'll round things off in a few minutes. Let's show our appreciation to Rob, shall we?
Thank you.